Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the hosts of the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, where we bring you stories that delve into the science and spirit behind intriguing people doing extraordinary things.
Today on the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, episode 16, we have our very first Olympic gold medalist with us, Justin Cripps. So Justin Cripps in 2018 ended up winning the gold medal in the two-man bobsleigh in Pyeongchang in South Korea. He's a two-time world bronze medalist, two-time world silver medalist, and just all-around great guy. I've had the privilege of getting to know him, also as massage therapist, and just a really, really rad dude. Can't wait for this conversation. And Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great having you, Justin. You know, we always sort of are curious about the story and how did we get there? What was the journey like? So, you know, there's that one side where, hey, I knew when I was 5 years old I'm going to be in the Olympics, and there's others who sort of evolved into it. Tell us a little bit of like, what did you do as you grew up? Was the Olympics something you thought about? Was bobsled, always on the horizon for you, or did it all just evolve?
It definitely evolved. It didn't take, I don't think, a traditional path by any means. Much like most of my life has been alternative, I think would be the right word. Yeah, basically I grew up doing pretty much every sport you can do that's not organized with a team. Because we used to move back and forth from Hawaii to Summerland, BC. And so, I didn't have any hockey, didn't have any football, anything like that. It was all kind of during that transition zone where I'd be either moving to Hawaii or over there. And once I was there, it was just about surfing. That was all me and my brother did. And, schoolyard games, whatever, running around playing dodgeball and stuff. But when I was 9 years old, I watched Donovan Bailey win the gold medal in Atlanta in '96. And I'd always been known, even at 9 years old, as like a fast kid, and I was so inspired by watching that. And I didn't watch a lot of TV anyway, so it was particularly thrilling for me. And I started right away practicing to be a sprinter. That's kind of what I wanted to do. And it was more sort of in we grew up on an orchard in Summerland. I'd run down the lanes in between the trees and race my dad and stuff like that. And that track and field took me all the way to university. It was kind of my focus. I started playing basketball and volleyball and stuff like that, but track was always kind of the main one. And I was just it's a matter of being something I was good at, and I loved competition. I was always a very competitive kid, and also a realistic kid. When I got to university, I realized that the chances of me making it to the Olympics, let alone winning anything, were pretty close to zero in track and field, and it was like, I was doing okay, but we were racing in the NAIA, which is a North American league, and it's mostly down in the States. And I just got blown away by all these guys down there who were running like 10.1 in university, and I was like a 10.7 guy. And right around the time when I realized that I might not be the best in the world at this ever, bobsleigh came knocking and invited me to try the sport, and it just kind of went from there.
So for our listeners, that was the 100-meter dash that you were doing.
Yeah, and we did the 100 and the 60 indoors.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
when you were 9 years old, and you were watching Donovan Bailey, probably I was as a Canadian, I was doing the very same thing. Watching the 4x100 with Donovan Bailey and Bruni Cern and Robert Esme and Glenroy. I think it was Glenroy Gilbert. But you were more inspired because of just watching that excellence, somebody doing something at their very, very best. So did you find that that kind of translated right away? Or was that kind of a multi-year kind of translation where you were like, okay, I'm going to train harder, I'm going to do more, I'm going to, join a track club?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it evolved for sure. I mean, at 9 years old, it's, you just don't think the same way that you do when you're an adult. But I'd always been kind of raised in an environment where, like, without being pushed too hard, it was always acknowledged that if you're going to do something, you're going to go 100%, you're going to be excellent at it. And I remember my dad always telling me when I was growing up that, one thing you always say is be yourself. And the other thing he said is, like, be the best at what you do. And that I took that into track and field, and it's always a balance, you're in high school and you want to go party with your friends and do this, that, and the other. And I did that stuff, and I'm glad I did back then, because it really doesn't matter at that point. But I always had a focus and a drive to be as good as I can be. And I don't like the feeling of finishing a race or an event or whatever it is and thinking like I could have done better just by choices I made leading up. Mm-hmm. And I'm definitely not, I'm not one of the types of people that subscribes to be good at whatever, you have to sacrifice everything else. I think a big part of your success, especially at a high level, has to do with mental health and your outlook. If you've sacrificed everything, you haven't had a drink with your friends, you've never gone to a party, it's too much, it's too much pressure. It's better to show up, and maybe somebody has like a 0.5% edge on you physically, but mentally you're happy and you don't get buckled by the enormity of the event you're in or whatever. I think it also helps. You can train and be excellent longer if you're not making so many sacrifices, if you're enjoying your life and having a good time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that. They always said Paula Radcliffe, one of the best female marathoners ever, she got more out of her mindset than she did out of the physical capability, and won lots of races as a result. So how did you come to that conclusion, though? Because that's one that very few people actually get to, realizing that, what gets in the way often is the head, not the body. Did you have some people, friends, coaches, role models that helped you, or you just started to?
I think, it's a combination of just the environment I grew up in, and also being kind of, I'm a thinker. I like to be very aware of what's going on. I like to know why things happened. And a lot of times in sports, I'm sure you guys have had this, whether it's a training session or a race, there's some days where you're just like really good and, for no reason. There's other days where you're planning to be very good and you're not so good. And that's a mystery to a lot of people. And it was a mystery to me when I started too. But I realize it's about your mental state that day. I mean, obviously you have to have the capability to do it in the first place. But there's so much is mental. I mean, your entire physical body is controlled by your mind. And I started to realize that those seemingly random times when you're really good or really bad, there's actually a reason for it. And it's what's going on in your head. So trying to figure out how you got into the headspace you got into for those really good performances, and also the headspace you're in for the bad ones, and how to kind of avoid that. And then, trying to recreate it. And that was sort of it kind of started when my dad has always been into meditation and yoga and stuff like that growing up. And I wasn't super into it as a kid or a teenager, but once I started performing at a higher level, I started looking more into that mental performance and meditation. And it was a long journey of figuring out like what works best for me. And I was lucky enough to have had a long enough career to figure it out. I think a lot of people probably don't.
Yeah, and that's super interesting too, because I think that, Justin, your event is very event specific, right? I mean, as a pilot, your job isn't done when you jump in the sled. Now you're piloting that 2-man or 4-man sled down the track. And I've heard other interviews with you before in the past saying that it's at that point it's all mental. It's being able to clear and focus on what you're doing, but it's almost like a flow state. So would you say that your upbringing with your father and a lot of his positive attributes that he ended up just, giving you, just in the fact that he was your dad and around. And even though a lot of the time with our moms and dads, we're like, oh, what do they know? When we're growing up, it turns out we actually become a lot like our moms and dads later on. Do you think that kind of put a lot of those pieces together that made you as excellent as being a pilot as you are?
Yeah, I think so. And I think if nothing else, it had that door in my mind just open a little bit always, where, when I was a teenager, there wasn't any of the cool kids or my friends or anything who were hanging out meditating together or talking about meditating or doing yoga or anything like that. It wasn't a thing. And I didn't do it either. But it was in my mind a little bit, especially once I started doing sports. And when I would get nervous to do events, I was very aware that that's coming directly from your brain. It's nothing's causing that other than your perception of the situation. And part of it was trying to, find a way to channel those, like nervous energy kind of thing. And yeah, so definitely, I think like that door was already open. I knew about it. And so I decided that was probably a really good direction to head in.
Yeah, and I think that, sorry to interrupt, Joe. I think that as well, like to kind of forward that, a lot of us when we're younger, we look at athletes like Donovan Bailey when he won the gold medal at the Olympics with 100 meters, and you see them go into this meditative state, beforehand. And we as athletes, we kind of sit back, and especially as 9-year-old boys, we sit back and watch that. But, I think there is something to be said about watching, your father and your mother, kind of your kings and queens in your world, doing that on a regular basis, and how that kind of permeates. So is your father still quite close with you in your life?
Yeah, for sure. And, I think, like you say, and thinking about it, one of the things that he's extremely good at and spent his life kind of perfecting his craft is music, and particularly the guitar. And he would play a lot when we were kids, and I would watch. And it was really interesting to me to try to play the guitar at 6 years old or whatever, and have no idea how to do it. And he'd show me some chords and stuff like that. But when I watched him play, like, he's not looking at his hands. He's not even thinking about the notes. He's just like, there could be music playing, he's playing along with it, or he's doing his own leads and stuff. And it's just automatic. Like the physical part is just an extension of what he's thinking and trying to make happen in his mind. And that's kind of, the skill you need to have a flow state that makes a difference, right? Like in basketball, the ball is an extension of your body. You're not thinking about, oh, I have to keep dribbling, because that's the rules. Everything's just automatic and flowing through you. And the physical mistakes are few and far between. And I think having exposure to that kind of flow state like he has when he's playing guitar is, partially why, again, like that, I was aware of that, like I was of meditation stuff, where a lot of people maybe aren't aware of that even until much later.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me, Dave, when we interviewed Natalie. So Natalie, a world-class fencer, was training for the Olympics before COVID happened. And when we had her on the podcast, she talked a lot about, in the match of fencing, the second she starts thinking, she loses. That there isn't any thinking at that point, that it's really that flow state, this total connection. If you think about it, any energy she was going on would be used for anything other than the purpose at that moment, takes away from performance.
Yeah.
Why we see people have routines, go through this certain routine. If you're a golfer or if you're a sprinter, that takes you out of sort of being conscious about the moment and letting the whole system just work naturally. I'd imagine, like lots of our listeners are not bobsledders. We watch it on TV and we watch in awe because, we got these little blades and you're going on this ice and you're keeping this thing straight and you're not crashing all the time. Although we did hear from Riz, there are some crashes.
Yeah.
So you said, and you can tell us more about bobsledding, but you said that, people were watching you and said, hey, you should try out for bobsledding. Had you ever been in a sled before? Did you know anything about the sport? Like it's an interesting, like we ride sleds in the snow, but
Well, yeah, especially for me. I mean, I had so just a brief timeline. I had only stayed in Canada for winters. As of high school, we decided to stay because school is getting a little bit harder and more important as far as getting into universities and stuff. And the system that we were in Hawaii was not very good, especially compared to the one we were in Canada. So we made a decision to stay. So I'd only ever experienced, 4 kind of relatively mild interior BC winters, and then 3 or so Vancouver winters. And so like I'd probably experience like maybe -5, -10, maybe at the worst. And coming out to bobsleigh, I had seen Cool Runnings. I'd seen that movie and I loved it, but like it wasn't like I had have the smallest clue about bobsleigh. And when I came out for like a physical testing camp in the summer, which Calgary is really nice in the summer, and then they wanted me to come back to actually get on the ice and try to make a team and stuff. And I came back at the end of September, and it was like freezing cold already. And I was like, what is this? It's only, I mean, it's not even, it hadn't even been Thanksgiving yet or anything. And I was frozen solid. So yeah, it was a strange transition for me because it was the whole dealing with cold, and like that's your environment in bobsleigh. Like you train in the cold, you compete in the cold, you're cold all the time. Like it's
Mhm.
something you have to get used to. But yeah, it was definitely a very new sport to me, and I was recruited for my potential ability pushing the sleds, not driving ability. That came later. But
Yeah, so
Wow.
let's talk about that a little bit, Justin, because that came later. When did you figure out that, hey, wait 1 second, I might be able to drive this thing? Did somebody not show up one day and say, hey, Justin, take the wheel and let's find out what happens? So tell us about that.
yeah, so I was sliding on Pierre Luder's team as of my second year in the sport, so 2007-8 season. I was on his team, and I stayed on his team until the 2010 Olympics. And as a brakeman, you're not super involved in well, driving line's not at all, not even a little bit. But equipment, sometimes the driver might ask you like, do you feel the back end stepping out a little bit? Does it feel like grippy or something? And the majority of brakemen, and myself too, when I first started, like I had no idea. Like I just jump in and it was a gong show, and then you get to the bottom and hopefully you're celebrating, or you're not, or you crash or whatever. We really had no idea what was going on in the back. But I started to really pay attention in the back because I don't know, it made me feel like more involved in the whole thing rather than just the start. And I would start to give some feedback, like, oh, on this run, like it felt like we had more like G-force in this one corner, or like it really feels like the sled wants to accelerate. And so Pierre would start to ask me kind of for feedback on different equipment setups he was using and whatever. And he ended up telling me, I think it was the Olympic year, he was saying that, he's retiring after 2010, and he thinks that I should take a try at driving and see if I'm any good at it. Cause he thought with kind of the way I was able to pay attention to what's happening in the sled going down, it's like a lot of people in bobsleigh are semi panicking the whole time they go down, because it's pretty insane and it's pretty scary. So he thought like I had the right kind of mindset and analytical mind and that sort of thing. And I thought to myself, like, one of the best drivers in the history of the sport is recommending I give it a try. Like I'm definitely going to, and it looked like fun. And so I did. And I thought that it was really fun when I tried it, and that I felt like I had a little bit of a natural kind of ability to do it. Like I made a ton of horrible mistakes for sure when I started, but like I felt like I understood kind of how the sled was interacting with the ice and the kind of physics behind it and whatever.
We have to go back to this panicking in so behind the driver are all the people in a 2 or a 4-man called brakeman? Is that or are there different roles in there?
Yeah, I mean, you can break it down a little bit more, but generally in the sport, you'll say you're a pilot or you're a brakeman.
Okay.
And the brakeman can push from any position on the 4-man, and they might be called side guys or side push athletes or crewmen in the 4-man. But they're all like brakeman is sort of the it's like saying athlete, it's just sort of everybody. But then the pilots are kind of have your own designation because you're sort of like running your little team and that kind of thing. And the results are in your name, like they call it like Team Crips and whatever like that.
So you're a brakeman, and did you always do 2-man or did you do 4?
As a brakeman, I mostly did 4-man because I wasn't good enough to be like on the top team in 2-man. They usually take the best guy from the 4-man team, and he does the 2-man with the pilot as well.
That would make sense.
But yeah, I did a lot of 2-man training runs as well, and then 4-man, I did all the different positions in the back.
So you push as hard as you possibly can for a few seconds, and then you jump in this sled, and you duck, and you don't see anything until you get to the finish line. Is that sort of?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, does it feel crazy with that, like sort of like your eyes closed kind of almost feeling of?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you sit in the second position in the 4-man, you can kind of see a little bit, but just out of your peripheral because the pilot's helmet is right in front of you. But the sensation of going down a bobsleigh track is, especially the first few times you do it, it's a very like almost unsettling feeling because you're very aware that you're going really fast and you feel these high G-forces and stuff. You have no reference points at all. So you're like, your body is not really almost sure if it should be like really scared or like not that scared or somewhere in between. It's just I remember my first run vividly, and it was just so crazy. Like it's almost impossible to describe. Like the G-force and the, even on a perfect run, it's very violent going into a corner even because you go from, flat on the ice to maybe 12 feet up on a corner sideways in half a second kind of thing. So it's just a super violent high G-force. And I was completely lost. I had no idea where in the track we were, which is a little bit not the best because you're supposed to pull the brakes at the end. And so I ended up having Lyndon Rush drove me down my first time, and he's kind of hit me in the head and yelling, brakes. But the guy had made the mistake of showing me a video of him in Altenburg the year before crashing. And as they come by the camera, you can hear Lyndon yelling as they're flipping over. So I'm thinking in my head, Lyndon's yelling, that means we're crashing. So I'm just ducking further down, but he's telling me to pull the brakes. And eventually I realized that the sled has been flat for a while now. And it had been, going crazy for a while, and then it's flat. So I was like, oh, we must be done. And I look up and he's looking at me. I ended up, we didn't go off the end or anything. We stopped a little bit further than you're supposed to, but it was just a very, you have no idea what's happening. Yeah. It's a crazy experience.
So
and for reference, I went in a fighter jet a few years ago, and it was not nearly as intense.
Wow.
It's the G-force that you feel in the fighter jet is like higher than in a sled, but it's very it's like cushioned by the air in a way, you know what I mean? Like it comes on smoothly, whereas in a sled it's like 0 G's, 7 G's, 0 G's, like it's very abrupt. So yeah, it was funny in the fighter jet. I was almost like, they don't take a lot of people up for rides, and most people that they do aren't bobsleigh pilots, so they're usually like whoa man, this is so insane. And I was kind of like, almost felt bad because I was like super relaxed in the back. It was very cool, and like it's super impressive what you're doing.
Right.
But you know, we broke the sound barrier, but there's just blue sky, right? Like you could be going 0 kilometers an hour, you'd have no idea.
Right.
Just the reference points are just so far away versus bobsleigh, they're like right beside you. It's just
Right.
a very different experience. But
Right.
So
And I
you,
think that's,
like, so
yeah, I think that's,
how do you get like past the first one and then want to do it again? I mean, is it like it's a rush to like, okay, this is cool, I really like this, and you're gonna stick it out, or it's like, oh, I'm a tough guy, I can't quit, and so
yeah, I think it can be either, and some people don't. Some people we'll get people who, you know, we'll hear about for 4 or 5 months, like a top football player, top sprinter that's coming out, and physically they're really, really good, and they're going to be on the top team or the second best team or something like that. And they'll go down the track one time, they'll get their bag and they'll go home. Like, it's not doing this. It's too crazy.
right.
And I think everybody's shocked the first time they do it. I think if somebody told you that they weren't, they're just trying to be a tough guy kind of thing. But there's definitely like, there's a part of you that's like, I can't just quit. Like, you know, I only did one, I got to try it at least again. And some people love it. I was sort of somewhere in between. Like I was almost like, I didn't know what just happened to me. So I wanted to try again and be like a little bit more, less caught off guard than I was the first time.
Have you jumped out of an airplane? Have you done that?
No, I haven't done that.
Sort of, we're trying to get some reference comparisons here.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's hard to find one. Like almost getting wiping out on a really big wave on a surfboard when you're underwater is like kind of a little bit what it feels like your first time going down, like just as far as being disoriented and getting thrown around. But yeah, it's just the violence of it and the G-force it's hard to find anywhere else.
Well, yeah. So you've been in the sport now since 2006. So it's 14 years in the sport, and that's a long time. Like, you know, just even your description of the G-forces and the violence and you know, have you gotten used to it? Are you now addicted to it? Because really, it doesn't sound like there's too much more that could kind of float your boat any more than that if you're kind of the G-force guy. Where are you at now? I mean, 14 years in, do you still want more, or do you find that you know, are you addicted to it?
So the entire experience changes when you go into the front seat. It's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different sport almost, because you're making those things happen and you're responsible for, you know, kind of what's happening on the sled. And I found having that level of skill, and it's so, there's so much to improve on from the first time you try kind of thing. And the ceiling is almost limitless because there's kind of no such thing as a perfect run. You know, you can always do something better. You can achieve the same line with steering a little bit less or whatever it may be. At this point, like I don't think, and I don't know this for sure, because I only spent 4 years in the back of the sled. I don't think anybody truly loves going down in the back of a sled. Like I don't think that's a thing. I think people, it's no big deal after a while. Like it's just sort of whatever. But driving a sled, like I know for sure when I retire, and there's not a lot of opportunities to drive sleds when you're not a competitive athlete anymore. I'm going to miss that big time because there's not a lot that I found anyway. I mean, maybe I could race cars around a track or something, but like you feel so isolated in that zone. Like you have people behind you, but they might as well be a million miles away. Like if everything's going well, you don't know that they're there, that they're not touching you or anything. And it's you and the ice, and it has to be that way, because if you are too aware of what's going on around you, your brain's doing too much work outside of focusing on the task at hand. And it really does take everything that your brain has to give to put together like a really good run. Like you have to be very focused and in a flow state, and you have to be experienced enough on the track to be able to just react and let things flow the way that they should. You know, you can't be thinking about lines too much. It's just too much, takes too much time to process. the opportunity's gone by the time you've thought about what you should be doing. But yeah, I would definitely be addicted to sliding. Like I probably, if I had it in a perfect world, I would slide a little bit less than I do in an actual competitive season, less days in a row kind of thing. Cause it's a grind out there for sure. And you get, a little bit like, oh man, like I gotta go down. I gotta go to the track. I gotta go down. And like, you have to be 100% every time. You can't just like take a run off. And you can take a run off and not go down the track. But if you're going down the track, you need to be like switched on, because you've got people behind you and it's dangerous. You've got a lot of expensive equipment you're driving, and you don't want to just be lackadaisically driving down the track and launch out of a corner and, write off $150,000 sled and give a couple of guys concussions. And so, but yeah, it's the actual driving itself is addicting. When you're at the very high competitive level, it can get exhausting for sure. But definitely it's, I don't think there's much like it out there.
So let's talk a little bit about the Olympics then, because you just said, you really got to be in that moment as good as you could ever be. So you show up at the Olympics, I'm sure that everyone wants to win a medal, of course. Love to win the gold medal, but we also know we're competing against some of the best in the world. Tell us a little bit about what was it like to come to the Olympics? Like, that must be a pretty amazing experience. And then tell a little bit about, how the event went, and then, the fantastic outcome.
Yeah, I mean, I've had three Olympics I've been to, and they've all been like such vastly different experiences. The first one was like, I was so happy to have made the Olympic team, and I was on a team that had a shot to do well. And but just it being a home games, and I'd only started the sport 4 years before that. Like it was when I started thinking about the Olympics when I was 9, all the way up until I would say probably 2007 or halfway through 2006, probably that season there, the Olympics were like a very far away, lofty goal in my mind. Like it was a goal, but it was like almost unrealistic. Like in track, it was pretty unrealistic. And I tried bobsleigh, and it was only a few months into starting bobsleigh. The driver I was with said to me and the other guys on the team in his car, we were driving to the track, he was really excited because we had I can't remember if we were in the ice house or on the actual track, but we had some really fast start times. And it was the first time that he'd ever been kind of assigned athletes who were like quite good athletes and like competitive start times that he could actually do well in races with. And I remember him saying, man, like this is so awesome. Like even if we just kept the team exactly the same as it is, like we could make the Olympics in 2010. And I was like, whoa, hold on a second, make the Olympics in 2010? It's in like less than 4 years. And I started this sport 25 minutes ago. And like, I didn't realize sort of the level I was coming into the sport at. Like, in track, there's thousands of people in your country running, and there's very distinct levels that you go through. But in bobsleigh, like it's almost national team or nothing. Like there is stuff below it, but like athletes that come from other sports rarely go into those levels. They go sort of to the national team or national development team, not like the provincial and club level sliding, which there's not a lot of, but it does exist. And so that like just sort of kicked me into a whole new gear of like training and motivation, because this goal was no longer like it was almost like it was a dream before, and then it became a goal because it was like I could see it was possible, and I could see the path sort of that I had to take to get there. But so walking into 2010 was just an incredible experience at a home games, the stadium's going crazy for the Canadian athletes. And it was also eye-opening to how stressful the Olympics are. It wasn't for me, but watching everybody else, I don't want to say fall apart, like nobody like fell apart, but like just so many high stress moments of like confrontations between athletes and coaches and coaches and coaches and athletes, like everybody kind of goes crazy a little bit because, you know, there's a lot on the line, especially, you know, in these kind of sports, your entire budget is based on how you do it, the games basically for the next 4 years. So that was just like eye-opening and a crazy experience and really fun. And I lived in Vancouver before and I was competing in the Olympics there, and just very, very cool. And then switching to the driver's seat, looking towards 2014, it was kind of like people were sort of, you know, coaches and everybody in the program was kind of like, you know, that's a really big goal for you to make it as a driver. And so the plan was to kind of develop me as a driver, but also have me still be a brakeman sometimes if they needed me, with the intention that if I didn't qualify as a pilot, they could switch me in as a brakeman, because I could probably contribute to one of those top teams as a brakeman still. And, you know, I got better at driving and I ended up qualifying relatively easily for the 2014 games. And I even won a World Cup race right before it, which was like crazy. I'd never won any, I'd never even been close to winning anything. And this was one of those moments that we were talking about with mental performance. Like I had no idea why I won that race versus coming 10th in all the other races. And that was something I used and looked back on over the next 4 years leading up into 2018 games, was trying to figure that out. Like what was the difference there, you know, and why in that week or that weekend, I just performed on a whole nother level than I have before. And then of course, 2014, I did really well in the 2-man, but it was a big disappointment. I came 4th, you know, like that was way better than I should have done, but I was so close to being 3rd that it was a big disappointment. And then I crashed in the 4-man, which is even bigger disappointment. So it was just a very intense experience. And I wouldn't change a thing though, because it led me to kind of this mindful journey of really not letting things happen to me anymore, like being in control. Because the way I looked back on that, the World Cup I won before the Olympics, like that just happened to me. Like if I made it happen, I have no idea how. I mean, I do now looking back, but like at the time I was like, well, what the heck? Why can't I just do that every weekend?
Right.
You know? And then at the same time, I didn't know why. Like I crashed in 2014. Like it's, you know, and looking back, and it's an experience thing. I should have done something. I didn't do it. But it led to this. I created this sort of mantra with one of the other athletes who was in my sled, Jesse, who also, he had a disappointing Olympics because he was the top brakeman, and he was put with the top pilot, obviously. But he didn't have a good Olympics, and they didn't place well. And, you know, looking back, if I had Jesse and Jesse got paired with me, we probably both have medals around our necks from those games. And so he was disappointed with everything, and I was disappointed with everything. And we kind of talked about like going into the next quad and the next games, like leaving no stone unturned, like thinking of every possible thing that can give us the best shot we can in 2018, whether it's, you know, mental performance, finding a way to get resources to buy better equipment, you know, team dynamics, working together better, whatever it is. We're just absolutely everything. This next one, we were going to be as prepared as we possibly could be, so that no matter what the result was, we could stand there and be like, that was the best we could do. Not the best on that day, but we had done everything we could do leading up to that to put ourselves in the best position we could to be successful. And that's what happened. Like I went into that 2018 season with like a lot of work and effort put in over the previous 4 years, and not just physical effort, but mental training and networking, finding people who would support us to buy equipment and stuff like that. And it ended up with me standing on the line at the start of the race for the 2-man, and just being in this like beautiful place where I was like sure that if I executed over those 2 days that I could win. And the expectations on me were to get a medal. I was ranked number 1 going into the Olympics. But I believed that like a medal was like if I really went for it and I fell short, I should get a medal, you know, like I thought that would still happen. And it was such a great headspace to go into, because it ended up being like just the most like potentially stressful race of all time. Like there was no time separating anybody. And for the 4th heat, like I could have completely fallen apart thinking about, you know, how many drinks I missed out with the boys, you know, sacrificing for training and like this, that, and the other. But I wasn't. I just stood there being like, this is like where I'm meant to be at this moment. My mind was clear. I knew I'd done everything I could. I was 600ths in the lead. I knew the guy behind me was like, had potential to go faster than me, had a better sled, a better start. But I was just like, I just need to do my thing, like clear my mind and just like not think about it. And that's what I did. Right. And yeah, it was like, I mean, it was a lot of work to get into that position. But what a great way to race. Like it was unreal.
And as you went down, did you feel like it was the perfect run?
You know, it's a funny feeling going down the track, because I try to, it's sort of like a meditation technique to, if like thoughts enter your mind, to just acknowledge them and let them go, not actually like let them go, not let them continue, if you know what I mean. Yep. It's like if you're watching the road and there's cars going by, like you see the car and then it goes by, you don't like get into the car and then go for a ride in it. That's sort of how I think of it. And so like things will creep into my mind. Like I nailed there's really 2 super important sections on that track, and I nailed the first one. And I was kind of thinking, okay, like that's, and I was like, don't think, keep going. And then I nailed the second one, and the second one is way harder than the first one. And when I did that, I was like, I kind of just like the fastest thought, I was like, whatever happens, happens, because you can't do much better than this. And, you know, we get to the bottom, and coming up the final corner, you barely steer in the final corner. There's not a lot of time to be made or lost at that point. And it was the first time I let like real thoughts creep in. And I was basically like, whatever number comes up, whatever place I end up, like that was the best I could do today, yesterday, and for the last 4 years. So it's a success no matter what. And then I saw the number 1 pop up and just like instantly started celebrating, and just, you know, greatest feeling in the world after that.
And if I understand correctly, you guys were tied with that time?
Yeah, we tied. Yeah, so I didn't know that until a couple minutes later.
Right. Because all you saw was number 1 pop up, right?
Yeah.
That's all you knew. Because did you really know? So let's go back a little bit, because I was watching that as a Canadian. Of course, you're like, what? Okay, we're up for a gold medal here. And the Germans were fast off the start, weren't they? Like and so they went down the track right before you guys. What I remember was that they ended up breaking the push course record on the track during that push. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know what their times were at the start. For whatever reason, I knew we were 600ths in the lead after their run. Or no, sorry, that was before their run. So yeah, I knew that because that was after the 3rd heat. But what I was really acutely aware of was that like that race was his to win or lose, because he had by far the fastest start and he had a much better sled. So if he put down a good run, he would be significantly faster than me. And I'm a bit of a numbers guy, and it's a bit of a numbers sport. Overnight, I was in, I think, 2nd, and I thought to myself, like, if Friedrich, the German guy who I tied with, if he had a really bad first day, but I knew he wasn't out of it by any means, obviously. But I knew that if he laid down like 2 really good runs, I would have to be like perfect, and then we'd maybe hang on to first, because he was just he was kind of on another level with the start that he had and the sled that he had. So I sort of knew, like, and he broke the track record in his first run. So I was thinking, if he does that again, it's going to be like insanely close. So it was just, I mean, I knew I had to essentially be perfect, and you don't really want to be like thinking about that. And I wasn't at the time, I get in my zone and go, but.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And the emotion that,
sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. The emotion that kind of came into your mind when you crossed that finish line and you saw the number 1 pop up. Now, of course, I can't say, hey, what did you yell? What was the first thing you said? But, if you could put into words, what your emotions were at that moment when you saw number 1 and that you won an Olympic gold medal, what was that in your body, in your soul? What was that feeling like?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's hard to even put it into words. Like, you're so, like, going down the track in those conditions, like in the Olympics or World Championships or whatever it is, you're already like kind of like riding a high because it's very intense, but at the same time you're very calm because that's how you drive well. And when I crossed the finish line, it was like I went from this like excited competitive level to like just a rocket ship to like a different level of like excitement and happiness than I've ever experienced before. Like, it was just every like good feeling you can think of at the same time. And like, I almost didn't know like who to high five or talk to, like it was just so crazy. And eventually, like, I saw my mom in the crowd, and right after we pulled up to the finish line, my team mobbed me and I couldn't even get my helmet off. And like, I was like celebrating and trying to take my helmet off and like trying to high five people. Like, it was just a happy gong show, like it was also like relief too. Like, it was, I wasn't thinking about it at the time, but I think relief comes whether you're aware that that you needed to do something or not. But, looking back, like, if I had made just one mistake, we would have been in 4th, not even 2nd or 3rd. Like, my original kind of prediction or hope that we could win the race if we did everything perfectly. And if we messed, a little bit up, we'd end up in the medals. Like, that would not have happened. We would have been for sure 4th. Like, it was only 600ths of a second or whatever it was, 400ths of a second separating the top 4. Just like, part of it was relief, like, that I didn't blow the lead, and like drop back even out of the medals, like it was, so many like positive emotions and like getting rid of worries that weren't at the surface, but they're in there, and they got taken care of all at the same time, kind of thing.
Amazing, right? It's like all that time and effort, the journey, and then you win. And all I was gonna say is that this sport, not that dissimilar, I guess, to what you started with sprinting, it comes down to actually amounts of time that we can't even almost measure, I mean, it's incredible that much can go on and we can end up with times that are the same.
It's unbelievable.
But it does say that you performed, even if it's a tie, that literally at the best of the world against some of the best in the world. And that's an amazing experience. So now you have a gold medal, and it's like the sort of, you're going to Disney World, or, you're getting ready for the Olympics again.
It's, I always, I was always planning on continuing after the games, at least for another cycle. And at this point, who knows like how long I'll go, but I got back from the Olympics, and the previous 2 Olympics I came back from, I've never suffered from the Olympic hangover that a lot of people do. Not in like a really negative mental health way anyway, but the first 2 games, it definitely, like, you go from this thing where you're competing against the best in the world and you have to perform at the highest level and every little detail matters, to like, you have nothing to do. You have no obligations at all. Like, you have 6 weeks to 2 months off training. If you didn't win a medal, nobody really like calls you up for interviews or anything, like maybe one or two here and there. But I remember vividly coming back from Sochi, and it was like 15 degrees in Sochi when we were there. And I came back to Calgary and it was minus 40. And I was sitting in this like dingy basement suite that I was living in when I was like grinding real hard, you know, like back in the day, I made the decision to train full time, like regardless of whether I could afford it or not. I was just going to do it and spend no money on anything kind of. So I lived in this horrible basement suite, and it was just freezing cold, and like my truck wouldn't start. And I went to Hawaii. Like I was like, my parents were over there. I just bailed, went to Hawaii, and like nobody missed me, you know, like it was, you're just sort of like done and that's it. But after this one, it was like full media tours and phone ringing off the hook. And it took me like months to catch up with like messages on my phone and social media. And like you're going to all these big events and flying all over the country. And like, it's crazy. So I did that for like two or 3 months, and felt like I was starting to get a little fat. So I got back to some more training, you know, and I didn't want to be the guy, like, you know, speaking in front of a big crowd about their like Olympic excellence and just have this big gut, you know? So I got back into it like relatively quickly. But yeah, like everybody almost on the World Cup team or the Olympic team retired. So it then became about like, you know, building a new team and just finding motivation to you know, keep going and keep competing.
So it touches a little bit on, you know, now you've been on the journey for a while, as Dave pointed out, and you're learning. Now you're, you know, one of the more experienced guys. You know, you have the gold medal in your, you know, in your pocket, so to speak. And now, what advice do you have to others who, you know, want to sort of step out into this journey? I mean, I'm sure you have a lot of takeaways that, you know, like, wow, if I had only known this, or boy, it's fun to learn that. You know, what are some of the insights you take from this, you know, 12 years, 14 years of being in the sport, but also continuing to move through in levels of performance to get to the highest level?
Yeah, I think one for sure that springs to mind is and could potentially be controversial, I don't know, but is to realize that if you're going to do something special or extraordinary, you're probably going to have to like find within yourself like how you're going to do something different than other people have done. And you might not necessarily get that following your coaches or like national team coaches or whatever it is, like to the T, because maybe they haven't been there, or maybe it's a different situation or whatever. But you know, all of my coaches I've ever had, I know for sure have the best intentions. They want me to win. They want everybody to be as successful as they can be. But if I just stuck my head down and did what they said and just did my physical training and competed in the equipment they provided and stuff like that, I wouldn't have any medals of any sort, whether it's Olympic. I'd maybe have a couple World Cup medals, but no world champs, no Olympics, nothing like that. And I think that the realization that you need to go to another level yourself, and the people around you that might even be in charge of you, you might have to find that level on your own. And that was something that I had to do for sure. You know, I needed to find a way to get equipment, and I needed to find, you know, a way to mentally get in the right headspace, and especially the mental part. It's going to be different for a lot of people. Like what your zone is versus my zone could be completely different. And just realizing that you might, you know, you're going to have to come up with something yourself, probably, to separate yourself was a big one. I wish I knew earlier.
But yeah, that makes sense, Justin. You know, sorry to interrupt. That makes sense when I watch you in your career, and because we both live here in Calgary, you know, and so forth. And what I do notice from a lot of the winter sport athletes in Calgary is that it becomes a bit of an a la carte. And some athletes are using one trainer, other athletes are using a different trainer that's, you know, with or without, you know, in the program, not in the program, different therapists as well too. And so, yeah, I've seen a lot of athletes like yourself kind of picking and choosing to kind of go more one way or the other. And you end up, and maybe that's speaking to your, to your expertise as well too, Justin, back with Pierre Lueders when you were a brakeman for him and one of the best, drivers of all time. You paid attention, and you pay attention now, and that's why you're an Olympic gold medalist. And so I guess that might be a message to our audience, is that you're paying attention to what you need in this present time. Because you're 33 years old. I'm sure. Sorry, I don't mean to make you sound old or anything. Just you're talking to two older guys here. So, but let's face it. When you're not 28 anymore, you're not 24, and so injuries and different things come up. And so you what you're saying is that you're having to kind of pick and choose and find your best route forward.
Yeah, and I think making like a roadmap, so to speak, for yourself based on like your abilities and your weaknesses as well. Like one of the things that, and like I didn't come up with all this on my own. Like one of my sort of partners or supporters, they provided me with a sports psych, and I was already kind of into the mental thing a bit, and I was, I'll admit I had this bit of a stigma. Like I was like, I don't need a sports psych. Like I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even really get nervous or whatever. That is the wrong mindset for sure, because luckily he was super good, and he kind of could tell like I was, one of these guys is like, I don't need that, or like whatever. But he said to me right away, like, this isn't about finding something wrong with you or like fixing a problem with you. He's like, this is about like your mental health could be like good right now. We want to make it great or excellent. Same as like you're a naturally good athlete, but you have to train to be good or great. And also that you establish a relationship so that if something does happen and you kind of go off the rails or whatever it is, you already have somebody that you have that relationship with to talk to about it. And they also, one of the things that he did and these partners did with me is they work with you to create a performance plan. So it's like a business plan about how you're going to be the best in your sport. And I found that super useful because they challenge you to really think about everything that goes into winning a medal, whether it's a World Cup, Olympics, whatever, and identify the places where you're lacking. And it doesn't have to be you, it could be your equipment or your teammates or whatever it is, but acknowledging that it's an issue and then fixing it. Because a lot of people just, you don't do that. You just keep doing your training and you go to your races and you maybe stall at 8th place or 10th place or whatever it is. But so I thought that was, having a kind of a roadmap, and, then once you have that map, you put your head down and you grind, and then you look at the map again and okay, I'm still on track. Maybe we need to adjust it a little bit this way. But just doing like what your coaches say blindly is it's unlikely to take you to the top unless your coach has a history of just getting, funneling people to gold medals all the time, which is not likely, I don't think.
I
think it's very good insight. I think this idea of having ability to listen to oneself and also take input, being able to differentiate between the two when, often we accept a lot of input from people that's really not very good, They're making judgments on us. I don't know, when you're in 4th grade and someone says you're not good at math and you still believe that 25 years later, and you're like, I'm not good at math. Well, why do you say that? And, so I do think it's very important to have that centeredness inside us and develop that over time, the confidence. It doesn't mean we don't listen, but we have to believe as strongly as anyone else, because we're the ones who are going to go do that. So I think it's a great, it's good to learn at whatever age, because so much of what we're all struggling with here is trying to find our own self, and I was told early in my life that the priorities in life, which sound awfully selfish, is we're number 1, our family's number 2, and our work is number 3. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anything else.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I think that's what we're hearing from you now. And so, as you do this now on a full-time basis, do you see, just out of curiosity, see yourself getting better, or are you improving? Do you have your pathway to another gold medal in the next Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to predict. There's so many factors, of course, but I feel like I hate to say, but I'm like starting to feel my age a little bit, which is, it's not an insurmountable hurdle by any means. And like by feel my age, I mean like, take longer to recover from workouts or like have little minor injuries more often than in the past. But when things are good physically, I still have the same, attributes. That strength is always, I find easy to get back. Even like, this summer was hard with training and COVID quarantines and all these different things. Strength comes back really quickly and speed takes a bit longer. So, and it's easy to get little injuries sprinting too. So that one's a little bit harder. But with the driving, I'm definitely getting better. I feel like it takes a while to like actually hit your stride. Like I'm talking 6 to 8 years, to like really, and to know all the tracks around the world as well. But yeah, I definitely feel like I'm getting like very, very good at driving, and I have to be smart about how I train to stay healthy. And I think I've been pretty good, me and my strength coach, about just being smart about things like, do I really need to go for this like 10 kilo extra power clean today, or should I be okay with what I did today? And because if I have a setback, cost me a month or whatever, but if I just lift 5-10 kilos less, it doesn't really matter. So it's kind of more about staying healthy for longer periods of time and just smaller incremental gains in training, rather than like going for massive gains at once and risking injury kind of thing.
And that makes a lot of sense. It's and going along with what you said, Justin, about it takes 6 to 8 years to kind of get your stride. Me and Joe in the ultra running world, it takes 5 to 10 years to build an ultra marathon running base. But once you got it, right? But then of course, then you start dealing with injuries and on and so forth, because let's face it, we're not 20, 25 and years old anymore. We're putting our bodies through the ringer. So, I'm really curious about this next question, Justin. Is because with your curious personality and someone who pays as much attention, to the world and your sport and expectations, and somebody who's come off of the highest amount of success in your sport as you have, what's next for you? What's tomorrow hold in store for Justin Cripps?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been part of my motivation since the games and since winning a gold medal is trying to be a leader and on the in the entire national team, leading by example. I don't want to ever be seen as like resting on my laurels or something like that. So using that as motivation to train hard, be professional on and off the ice, and try to make those around me better as well. Whether it's drivers and giving them tips and tricks, lines, whatever, and then brakemen, giving them kind of some insight into what I learned from winning that medal and being in that situation. About like a high performance mindset of like always like hitting your shots and focusing every time. Like when you can have as much fun as you want when you're not at the track, and then when you get to the track, it's like business. And when you get really good at it, you can maybe have some fun at the track too, but you can switch it back on and be switched on all the time. So yeah, that's what it's been for me. And then, I'm hoping that's translates into excellence myself into the next games, and hopefully defending the title, and then finding something, maybe I keep going, maybe I don't, but finding another passion to kind of, dig into as well.
Wow. Well, Justin, that was amazing, captivating, and, very excited for you, what you've accomplished, and then the potential that you have ahead. So thanks for coming on the podcast today. I know our listeners will have loved listening to this one, and we wish you the best, and let's go get that second gold medal.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Thanks, Justin.